The story of George Catlett Marshall begins far from the glare of fame. Yet it ties deeply to Alabama through the land stakes of war, rebuilding in the legacy of Southern sons who served the Union and beyond. Born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, in 1880 Marshall's name would later touch Alabama through the military installations, strategy schools, and Deep South officers who trained under his quiet, disciplined hand. His shadow would pass through Fort Benning, Georgia, and into the Alabama training fields during the great fires of the 20th century. He was not a man of rhetoric, but of duty, tall, reserved, precise in his movements, words measured like the steady beat of a metronome. The early 1900s found him a young officer stationed across the American South, including brief tenures instructing Southern cadets who would later lead in both world wars. Even then, Marshall's insistence on professionalism transcended region, class, and politics. He served not as a son of the South, but as a soldier for the whole of America, and the Alabama military academies remembered him well. When the First World War erupted, Marshall rose through the ranks with quiet distinction. He served under General John J. Pershing, coordinating the movement of hundreds of thousands of men through Europe. He did not seek glory on the front lines. Instead, he built the invisible architecture of victory, logistics, planning, and precision, the things few noticed, but all depended on. After the war, he returned to a fractured United States. The South still bore scars: rural poverty, segregation, and the slow transformation of its economy. At Fort Benning, just over the Alabama line, Marshall revolutionized officer training. Thousands of young men from Alabama, white and black, would pass through systems his mind designed. His methods shaped the army that would later fight in the Second World War. Quietly, the name Marshall became synonymous with competence. Then came 1939. The world darkened again. Hitler advanced across Europe. Roosevelt needed a leader who would not bow to politics. He chose Marshall, the soldier from Uniontown who had trained the South's officers and built an army from almost nothing. Marshall became chief of staff. He rebuilt the United States military from 1,600,000 men to over 8 million. During those years, Alabama's fields echoed with the rumble of transformation. The war industry surged in Huntsville, Mobile, Birmingham, Montgomery, Fort McClellan expanded. The Redstone Arsenal began to grow. Roots that would later bloom into the space age. Marshall's policies and commands shaped all of it, even from Washington. He advised Roosevelt with honesty no one else dared. When others feared to speak, Marshall spoke plainly: we must be prepared to fight. His mind drew the global map of World War II, not through aggression, but through necessity. Eisenhower, Patton, Bradley, all were men who had passed through his influence. And though he never commanded a single battle, his fingerprints were on every victory. When the guns fell silent in 1945, Europe was broken, cities burned, millions wandered in hunger and despair. And once again, Marshall's vision turned to rebuilding. As Secretary of State, he offered a plan, not for conquest, but for compassion. It was called the Marshall Plan. Billions of dollars in aid to rebuild the shattered nations of Europe. It fed the hungry, rebuilt industries, and restored hope. For that, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1933. The effects rippled across oceans and decades. Alabama, like much of America, found itself drawn into a new world, one of diplomacy, science, and the birth of the Cold War. The military bases he had strengthened became engines of research. Redstone Arsenal, which had grown from his wartime structure, would later host Wernher von Braun and the space program that sent humanity to the stars. Marshall never boasted. He refused political office, refused fame, even refused to write memoirs. When asked about his achievements, he said simply, there's no limit to the good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit. He died in 1959, but the institutions he built, the military academies, the command schools, the discipline, professionalism that flowed through places like Maxwell Air Force Base and Fort Rucker, carried his spirit. Though he was not born of Alabama, his influence bled into its soil. Through every soldier trained, every lesson taught, every structure of command that shaped the state's modern identity, George C. Marshall, soldier, architect, peacemaker, stands as a bridge between destruction and rebuilding, between war and the fragile peace that followed. His legacy remains a quiet constant, not the roar of victory, but the enduring hum of order, reason, and duty that outlasts the noise of battle.